Good morning, Jamalyn.
Good morning.
We're back again.
Here we are. One thing more.
Where the conversation continues.
Ba-dum-bum.
Yes, where we continue to talk about the sermon from Sunday.
Listen, before we get started, I wanted to let you know someone, one of our fans, I almost said many fans, but I'm not sure how many fans are out there. But anyway, she was very concerned about your footwear last week.
Oh.
Because we had all this snow and you had sandals on.
Oh.
She was like,
Well,
what?
now.
And I said, well, what you don't know is she'd just gotten a pedicure.
Exactly. It's rough, but I just gotta, work through getting
Well,
the
I thought it was
pedicure.
funny because I was like, oh, so at least we know one person watches, because if you didn't watch, if you just listen, you wouldn't
right.
know that you had sandals
That's
on.
true, yeah.
But today, the weather, we're at that part of winter when I get fired up that it's going to be 35 or 40.
Yes.
I was like, ooh, I'm going to go on a long walk
I know.
today.
I just wore a sweater instead of a coat.
Well, that's a little. Well, I would expect that from someone who wears sandals in the snow.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about humility this week as a spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. And, yeah.
Which is interesting, right? Like, what does it mean to be humble? I think in my Baptist tradition, I sort of felt like it meant, like, really, like, becoming a doormat, and I don't think that's what it means.
And they mentioned that in the sermon. Being
Yeah.
humble doesn't make you a doormat.
Yeah.
I always think of this movie called Return to Me. It was like late 90s, early 2000s. Minnie Driver and David somebody was in it, the guy from X-Files. Anyway, his wife was like raising money for this gorilla sanctuary, and there's this character who's paid for the whole thing, and they're having like this gala soiree, and he's walking around and telling everybody, well, I gave a huge donation. I gave a huge anonymous donation, but he's telling everyone, it's anonymous. I don't want anyone to know. Like, I'm so humble. I don't want anyone to know. That's always... I think humility is hard. Like, we want to do something good. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like we talked about last week with leadership, this whole idea of, I call it like toxic charity, but Shannon, I forget what Shannon called it now.
What, vainglory?
Vainglory. Yeah. I think sometimes people try so hard to be humble that they slip and go back into the vainglory.
Yeah.
Vainglory.
I think humility is a challenge.
It's a spiritual practice.
It definitely is a spiritual practice.
I think in our American mindset, too, it's really hard because we want to push hard and let people know that we aren't slacking off. Mm-hmm. It's always like, I always think it's funny when I used to have people say to me, oh, like, I haven't had a day off in 15 days. That was their way of trying to say, I'm so humble, I'm working so hard here. And my response always to them was, well, that seems a little reckless.
Yeah, it does.
Like,
it does.
You should take a day off. I don't know what to tell you.
You should definitely take a day off. Yeah, and I think because in our culture so many rewards are tied to hard work or success or whatever you call it, that, people sort of sit on that as something good, and it isn't always good,
So Dave talked about the missionary that was in Africa, and she was going over there to really dig in and do the Lord's work, and she ended up working for the pastor of this village whose wife was pregnant, doing all the housework and nannying and all that stuff. And
not what she had in mind when she left.
No. And I immediately triggered to when Dave and I moved to Haiti. I had we got married in January of 2003. I graduated from Duke Divinity School in May of 2003, and we moved to Haiti in August of 2003. So I was barely 3 months out of just getting my master's of divinity when we moved to Haiti, and I was making spreadsheets for the school.
Not what you had in mind either.
No, that was very difficult for me. Dave was teaching in the classroom and making relationships, and I was the keeper of all the birth certificates, basically, in the community, in our room, staring at a computer screen, trying to make spreadsheets for all of this. And every day for almost 6 months, I would go to this bench and sob because I was like, God, what am I doing here? Like, I came here to really.
And it was your idea to go to Haiti.
It was
right?
my idea to go to Haiti. No one talked to me. I didn't know. I mean, there were whole other reasons, but the work was really was a struggle for me because I thought I'm so relational.
I was going to say, and you're the one who's like out and
Yeah.
about and meeting people.
And I'm creating spreadsheets,
Yeah.
which now I see the fruits of that labor because up until that point, they didn't even have a class list at the school. So, and now they obviously do all of that. But at the time, I was like that poor woman in Africa hanging up sheets and thinking, what am I doing?
Is this ministry?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was hard, but I remember specifically being on my wailing bench, as I ended up calling it, one day, and after almost 6 months, just sort of feeling God's presence with me, and just understanding God saying, we can do this every day if you want to.
Oh, yeah.
Or you can try and understand that I'm leading you to something. And I always tell people in that moment, that's when God sort of broke me over God's knee and was like, yeah, your type A stuff, we're going to need to get rid of that.
For a little while. It's funny how something that seems really unimportant or mundane or useless, leads you to a place of something really meaningful and something you can use later on.
Yeah, it wasn't until I surrendered to that, which they talked about this sort of this idea of submitting yourself to someone else or to something greater than you.
Yeah.
That I really started to enjoy the experience. But I was like, prior to that, I just felt like it was, banging my head against the wall. And it was when I finally was like, okay, I'll try it your way, but I want to be clear, your way probably isn't going to help me. And guess what?
It did. You were becoming obedient, I think, when they talked about obedience.
Yeah, but you would think going to Haiti, moving there with your new husband, I thought I'd sort of check that off the box.
Right.
I didn't realize there was going to be more development once I got there. Moving there was the easy part.
And
You
thought
know,
that was the hard part.
That was the easy part.
Yeah.
Allowing God to shape and mold and create me into this other thing, that was the really difficult part.
It is. It does take some obedience and surrender.
Which is hard if you typically don't enjoy authority.
Yes. Well, I wrote in my notes when they talked about obedience, I was like, whoo, like that one. I don't know about that.
Well, yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah. It is hard. And I think as a country, we're all struggling with that a bit right now, too.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, it's that breaking of the things inside you that grind and just saying, I'm going to exhale and trust that this system is going to work. And I think that is hard for all people. I think it's hard for people like us who really want to, at our heart, we're advocates. And so we feel like we want to speak up for others. And being told, I'm going to need you to be quiet and just work the process.
It's hard.
I mean, as a therapist, you're like, yeah, it's hard, but that's what I get paid to do, right?
And I oftentimes I say thank you for trusting the process, because it does work if you trust it, right?
Sure, but now this conversation is starting to make me feel uncomfortable. John, let's skip ahead to something else.
Well, I
Producer
think too,
John,
like
can you just skip past this part, please?
Humility and obedience also require that you put other needs before your own.
Yeah.
Which is hard.
Well, I think sometimes it's hard to put your own needs ahead of others.
Yeah.
Too, when your own needs mean you need to work on something.
Oh, yeah. That's always, that mirror is a hard thing, right? Looking in the mirror.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
See how quickly, listener, she skips right into therapy mode?
Well, maybe that's needed today.
I was just going to say, you guys were talking about humility, and there's this how do I become humble? But can you look at the other side too of people that are so humble, or what they feel like is humility, where they won't accept any appreciation for the work that they actually do.
Oh, I love it when John chimes
do
in.
too. I
Very
wish-
nice, John. It is hard for people to receive and to be humble in that way.
It's kind of, I think we're enculturated to not think too highly of ourselves, not brag on yourself, not be conceited, whatever words people would use. But that is different than accepting that you did a good job, like celebrating that in someone else. But I think it is hard for some people to receive a compliment.
Oh, 100%. John, speaking of which, is really awful at receiving compliments.
It's no big deal.
I'm here for you.
Yeah. But this brings up something interesting because I'd like to see what you guys think about this. A friend of mine, I have like this group chat with my high school buddies, and a friend of mine yesterday said, just out of curiosity, when you go to Starbucks and the person in front of you buys your coffee, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to buy the coffee for the person behind you or what? And I said, when that happens to me, I take it as a blessing. I say thank you. And then later I may buy someone's coffee. But if I buy the person's coffee behind me, I feel like it takes away the generosity of the moment because all I'm doing is going back. And one of my friends said, well, I always buy for the people behind me unless their order's $20. But my friend said, that's so hard for me. Like, she said, I don't like, if I get a gift, I really struggle to not give a gift back. So what do you do at Starbucks?
I think I've probably done both. I think sometimes I've just been grateful, like just rest in the gratitude, and other times I've probably paid for the person behind me. But I like the idea of just letting the gift stand on its own and then giving a gift later to someone.
I think it's somewhat of a spiritual practice to wait.
For sure.
Because immediately what we want to do is not accept the compliment or not accept the gift.
Yeah, sort of brush it off, right?
Yeah.
Like you did this morning when I loved your sweater. And you're like,
see how that's an interesting callback.
Yeah, but we just did that, right? I was like, oh, I love that sweater, Jamalyn. It's such a good color on you. You're like, I don't.
It's actually true, listener. I did say I'm not sure. If you like the sweater in the comments, if you could just let me know and pump me up a little, that would be so great. Yes. Okay. Well, that's very interesting.
I just think, it's something that we're sort of we learn to do that, not accept a compliment, which I don't think is a very good thing. We should accept them.
Okay. There was something else that Dave and that they talked about. The practice of leadership goes hand in hand with the practice of humility. How does that statement make you feel?
I think leaders have to always lean toward humility because as a leader, part of your responsibility is to be coaching and uplifting and helping people to grow. And so I don't think you do that from a non-humble stance. You can't be always the expert.
Yeah.
You have to be listening. You have to be open for critique. So I think that all those things take humility.
I thought of when, I played team sports all through my adolescent, high school, whatever. And I thought one thing is, the saying, there's no I in team. We have to be a collection. I remember when I was a pledge in college, they'd be like, how many people are in your pledge class? And we'd say 13. And the activists would be like, wrong, 1. And at the time, I thought, this is the dumbest thing. But I understand now a little bit more is when you are leading teams, you really are only as good as your weakest person. And it's fascinating for me to watch Margaret going through group projects in high school, which That's really tough for her.
Was it tough for you?
Oh, heck no.
No?
No,
Major
it gave me an
projects.
opportunity to delegate to others and to really cheer them on and to take the good
And
grade.
see, I think I'm probably more like Margaret. It gave me a chance to like be like, that is subpar work, and so let me just do
No,
it.
no. But I was always in school I was always work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, well, that's a good philosophy.
I was the one who was always putting together the group study guides for the final, and I'm not going to study all 10 of those questions on my own. I'm
You do this
delegating
one?
that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And so, so I think it is true. I think the hard part when you're a leader, and I experienced some of this in my previous job, when we would have these huge events and people would be saying, oh my gosh, it was so amazing. They were kind of looking at me when I knew that and a lot of times all I had was the idea. And then it was sort of like the 10 people behind me that was working quickly to see if we couldn't really make this happen. And sometimes it's hard when you say, it wasn't just me, it was really a team event. And then they want to say, no, but you were the one.
Yeah.
And then you're like, no, but really,
I think it is important, though, what you did as a leader to say, thank you, and all of these people also were, you know, critical in getting it to this day, and helping the event be what it is. So, yeah.
But there are leaders who are like, thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
You notice there was a pause after the thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll be available for comments after the event.
And you're like, can you tell us a little bit about how you made that happen? No, I cannot.
Yeah,
That's
right.
right.
Or, your team's in the background like, what? There was a lot of,
John's coming back, everybody.
I was just going to say, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with something that Kim said earlier about, as a leader, being the smart one. I think one of my pet peeves that kind of goes along with this is the person who always feels like they're the smartest person in the room, where, I don't know, I'm always more impressed by people who, especially when I know they are really smart and they're a great leader, and they're just happy to be in the room, hearing what other people have to say, and they don't always have to feel like they are the smartest or project that they're the smartest, even if they might be.
Yeah. Yeah, I get fired up when a team comes up with an idea and I don't have to really be the one who throws it out.
Yeah, I would much rather work like that than to say, oh, here are my ideas, which one's the best one?
I think that goes back to, I'm really happy with the 10 people answering the questions on the study guide, and then I put it in the packet.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe that's part of my sales background is I have all these like engineers creating a product. I just want to go sell it when it's over, and then take the commission and skip all the way home, baby. I do miss commissions. But that's a really good point. And sometimes I always get frustrated that the person talking the most in the meeting is probably the person who should not be talking. And that can be, as a leader, that can be frustrating too.
And I think good leaders find a way to circumvent that, to kind of.
Maybe they say, I think it's time for you to go get us all coffee. And then while that person's gone, you say quickly, we need to finish up this project. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last thing, because again, we're already at our time. It's so crazy, people. So I just want to reiterate this. This is what Dave talked about Sunday in his sermon. Practice of leadership goes hand in hand with the practice of humility. Number one, don't feed false motives. So he gave us, I haven't done this yet, try to go 24 hours where you try to do nothing out of selfish motivation.
We'll try. I think that, I'm just thinking about it. Can we even do that?
I don't know.
think we
This
have to be
morning,
super
I
intentional.
let someone know I was praying for them, and now I'm wondering, did I tell them I was praying for them just so they would know I was praying for them? And then they tell me I'm great?
Yeah. I don't know.
This is a slippery slope for
Yeah,
sure.
it is.
All right.
It is.
Number 2, daily emptying of self.
Yeah, kenosis.
So I don't, kenosis I think is a Greek word. I did not take Greek in div school.
Yeah, Dave is all about that.
My New Testament preacher told me that is the same thing as malpractice as a physician. And I thought, well, I'm not going to preach, so I think I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
But kenosis is we must pour out our agenda and control, emptying out our bad attitudes.
I mean, I think that's a great practice, like maybe even at the end of the day as you're being grateful for the day, like just to try to empty yourself of all that's happened.
Okay, I like that. That's another big exhale. And the third was we become obedient.
Yeah.
Submission of self to be submission of self to someone who loves you in return. So I know submission can be a triggering word for some, but I think what Dave was trying to say is it's an understanding that I submit to you and we have an understanding that we're going to submit to each other.
Yeah, and we can definitely submit to God. Yeah, and the one thing that we haven't talked about yet that I think is important is the inverted pyramid that Dave talked about.
Yeah.
And how when you're a leader, you need to serve. You know, that really servant leadership is where you need to be landing, that you need to put yourself last or at the bottom and put those who are the least or marginalized at the top of that pyramid.
Yeah, so the least become the greatest.
Absolutely.
And that is hard to think when you have that, think about an upside down triangle, listener, where at the bottom is the leader.
And that's just so contrary to the way things are organized in our culture.
Yeah. Well, if you read the book of Luke, that's what's really going on the whole time in the book of Luke. And this idea that a leader is willing to humble themselves, going back to the scripture that Dave used to start off, emptying out of, that Jesus emptied himself out, became nothing, so much so that he was even willing to go to the cross and die for us.
Yep.
A leader is normally the one standing on top of the pile,
Right.
not the one hanging from a cross.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just.
So that's a really good model of what humility is to look like. And it's very difficult because we all really want to be the one holding the trophy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But, I thought about Margaret wrote a play and they performed it last night. And I think this was her first taste of what humility was like at the end of the play when the cast comes out and bow, does their whole bow. The director and the writer aren't on stage with them.
That's true.
They're sitting in the crowd watching, and everyone's giving accolades to the actors, not the people who wrote the words. I saw it totally different last night when I was watching it. And I thought she handled it really well, but,
Good. Yeah, we have a producer who handles that really well too. He's always behind
That's
the scenes
true.
making it happen. And
John.
he handles it so well.
Thanks, John. Let's
Thanks,
end on that
John.
high note. Yay, John, our humble producer who's going to edit this and make it sound beautiful.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. All right.
Well, we are way over time. Sorry, listener. Hope you stuck with us.
And we will be back next week.
And I am not sure what we're going to talk about, but it's going to be great.
It'll be great.
Have a
Join
great
us.
week, everybody.
Bye, everybody.